Hello and welcome to another episode of the RevRx podcast, where we talk about how to thrive in faith, family, and health. My name is Chad Potts, and I'm your host. I'm so excited for you to meet our special guest today, Dr. Cindy Hovington. Cindy is a neuroscientist and a parent, and she blends those two things together to show us what it looks like to follow science to become the best version of mom or dad to our children. You see, parenting is very, very difficult. And here's the thing, everyone has an opinion about what you should or should not be doing. Everyone does parenting differently, and oftentimes the scientist in me wonders, is there not some sort of basic truth that can help us along this parenting journey? To which Dr. Hovington would say, yes. And while we realize that every parenting journey is different, every child is their own individual, and there is no one-size-fits-all complete parenting advice, there are some things, some general concepts that science shows us that's really, really helpful as we seek to become the best moms and dads to our children. And so today, Cindy is going to walk through some of the core precepts she teaches in her business, the Curious Neuron. It's a community that she just recently launched and is teaching people how to think about parenting in a way that is backed by science. This was a fantastic interview. Cindy's doing wonderful things in the world of parenting. And make sure you check out the show notes for today's episode, because you're going to find some exclusive discounts for RevRx listeners that Dr. Hovington has been so kind to pass along to you guys. So make sure you check her out, the Curious Neuron. I'm going to have links and everything in the show notes. But without further ado, I introduce to you my friend, Dr. Cindy Hovington. Today on the RevRx podcast, I'm so excited to have as a special guest, Dr. Cindy Hovington. Cindy, thank you so much for being here and being a guest on our show today.
Hi, Chad. I'm so happy to be here.
Cindy, I love the work you're doing. You're kind of blending the fields of science and neuroscience with parenting. And I feel like I can geek out on that pretty well because, I have a scientific background. I'm a pharmacist. And so, I'm big into show me the science. A lot of the parenting advice and the different things that are out there, they're all anecdotal. You get conflicting different opinions, and everybody has an opinion about parenting and what you should do, what you shouldn't do. But I love what you're doing, marrying together science with parenting. And so I'd love to hear kind of your story. You have 3 littles as well that are near the same age as mine.
Right.
And so you understand the struggle. And so selfishly, I've been really, really looking forward to having you on the show to just talk about parenting and science. So
I love talking about science and how we can merge that with parenting. So I know we're going to have a great chat. Yes, my kids are 5, 7, and 9, and I have to think about that because I often get that mixed up. But just to say that for me, it was when I became a parent, 9 years ago. I also, coming out of science, was ready to find out, like, okay, where is the hard evidence? Like, I am hearing a lot of opinions, and from my grandmother telling me to shake the legs a certain way because that helps them grow straight, literally something I heard, to a random stranger telling me how to hold my child and what to do with my child. And so I became very overwhelmed. And so I started searching for information online and quickly realized that it was mostly opinion-based, and that's not what I was looking for. And so I kind of dove back into the research and said, I know I've seen stuff, I know that there are some articles out there. My background is in neuroscience, but I studied mental health specifically in teenagers and young adults who were suffering from schizophrenia and psychosis. But the aspect of my research was, how is mental health impacting their emotions and their brain development? And so that led to that base of the knowledge as I was becoming a parent for the first time, where I kind of went back into emotion regulation skills and what does that look like? And how can I now, as a mom, support my child with her emotions? And so I started blogging about it. And that's how CuriousNeuron.com launched, and then the podcast, and then social media. And now we're launching a membership. So very slowly, each piece was built, but always grounded in science. There was... even when I give my opinion, it's not my opinion. I say, I've been doing this because I read this article and it gave me this idea and I tried it and this is what worked. This is what didn't work. I don't want to tell parents what to do. I don't want to be that sort of parenting platform or resource that says, if you yell at your child, how dare you? You've damaged them. I've never wanted to be that kind of platform. I've wanted to be the platform that says, here's what I read. I could, I've summarized it in a way that's applicable to you and understandable. Here's what you can do and here's what you can try. That's my goal.
Yeah, and that's really appreciated because there's a lot of shame and judgment when it comes to parenting.
A lot.
You don't if you post a picture on social media of your kids, you're like, people are like, hey, you're holding them the wrong way, or
right.
Why are you doing this? And so you really come from a place of there's no judgment or shame there. This is just how the science plays it out. Try it. Not saying you're a bad person because you haven't.
No.
Not saying because a lot of us are doing the best we can. And
exactly.
I think acknowledging that, but then realizing that if we have more tools in our tool belt, specifically some that are scientifically backed, that really can help us kind of step up our game, level up our parenting game, so to speak. So
exactly. And, I think what you said there about the parent, I truly want to support every parent. It's a lonely journey becoming a parent, and we don't talk about that feeling of isolation enough. And there aren't enough resources that truly support us. And for me, Curious Neuron has kind of evolved, across the years, where I focused on sharing all the research around development at the beginning. But then about 2 years ago, I realized that, or 3 years ago, I realized that if we are not well, if we are struggling, if we can't regulate our emotions, if we are stressed and overwhelmed, then it doesn't matter what you know or what you've read in terms of how to support your child, you will not be able to apply it in the same way. And so Curious Neuron switched from focusing on the child to focusing on the parent. And that's when I saw the biggest growth and the most connection with parents, where they felt like, finally, I feel seen. I yelled at my child and I feel bad about it and I feel guilty. But now Curious Neuron is telling me, like, take a breath and remind yourself of your needs right now, right? Rather than saying, like, you damaged your child.
Yeah, because that just further perpetuates the whole issue.
Right.
That doesn't
We
help.
don't need more stress.
No. And so I'll go ahead and just put this out there. Parenting is probably the hardest thing I've ever done. And I think a lot of people can resonate with that. There's really no guidebook out there on exactly how you should raise your child. I think a lot of people are kind of just hoping that we're doing well because there's really not a benchmark until, all right, the benchmark is, how is my kid doing?
Not me.
Right, exactly. And so on your website, one of the quotes that pops up immediately is from the Child Mind Institute, and it talks about how 60% of parents talk about how they're overwhelmed by the demands of parenting. And I wanted to kind of talk about that as we begin our conversation. And why do you think that is? But there's a lot of overwhelm associated with parenting. What do you associate that with?
It's kind of interesting that that's the quote I had on my website, because last week, I believe, the Attorney General in the US came out with that parental stress and overwhelm is almost I forget the words he used now, but it's becoming a concern, a public concern, a health concern. That's what it is. So, I mean, the fact that this was already out, we were already talking about it. We are years, we were past this pandemic that we were, stuck at home. And I think that kind of instigated the big growth. But more than that, we are parenting alone. If you think back to even some cultures still today, where once you have a child, the community and your family and, they come to support you. And so for that new mom, she might have support and might not have to cook and might not have to clean. And somebody might be there to hold her baby. The father might have support too, as the community comes in and pitches in, and they just feel supported.
Sure.
We are doing this on our own. So I think more than anything, that feeling is that loneliness and isolation and lack of community is leading to overwhelm. That's one big thing. But if you look at the parents' day today, I mean, when you look at everything that we're balancing and everything that we're doing and all the kids' activities and all of the work and the different goals that we have for work and the work, as a couple and as parents, everything we're trying to achieve, I think that we've forgotten that, even for myself, like the simplicity of spending time with your kids. Sometimes I'll get emails from parents like, what activities can I do on the weekends? And the activity I tell them is just be present, stay home with your child once in a while, right? Just disconnect from everything. I want you to turn your phone off, turn the screens off, go play soccer outside, go throw a ball, play a board game, play card games, something, connect with your child. And we are so busy doing things that we're disconnected from ourselves, from the people around us, our partners and our children. So it's it definitely has multi layers in terms of why, but those are just the few that come to mind.
Yeah, and that's really powerful. One of the things you're trying to do is to build a community around this. So you're
Exactly.
combating directly that first thing, the isolation,
Right.
which I think is a big part of this. And you're right. The West is a culture that is highly individual.
Yeah.
We don't have that same that same support system that maybe other cultures do, that maybe we had years ago.
Probably.
And
exactly.
So and so it feels like we're doing this alone. And then there's the aspect of connecting with your kids is kind of becomes an afterthought.
Yes.
And that's never, again, not judgment or shame laced.
No, never.
It's just a reality. And I'll tell you that sometimes that's the case with me. A lot of times I find myself trying to create a program of sorts for what we're going to do on a weekend, rather than, here's the thing I've noticed: my kids will tell me what they want to do. If your kids are verbal,
right.
if they're to the age and advancement and whatever, they'll tell you what they want to do. They'll bring you a ball. They'll say, let's play board games.
Yes,
and
exactly.
It's just being there with them, and I think there's value in just saying, what do you want to do? Because, if you think about it, you send them to school and their day is mapped out. They come home, they may have homework that's mapped out. Then we have a regimen of, dinner and, baths and bedtime and all that's mapped out. So sometimes they just need that space, and you're going to like this, that space to be curious, right?
Can I quote this? Exactly.
Right. And I want to kind of delve into that curiosity a little bit, because one of my kids the other day, one of my children said, "Daddy, I'm bored."
Oh, I'm so happy. Yes, I'm so happy you said that word.
Yeah, "Daddy, I'm bored." And my response to that was good.
Yes, that's what it should be.
But, it was one of those moments where I'm like, wow, they're not bored enough. Maybe we're regimenting this thing too much. And, I wanted to talk with you because you've got some articles on your website that talk about how boredom is good for kids. Can we delve into that a little bit about the curiosity and the boredom and, just kind of self-directed play?
Yeah, I will never stop talking about boredom because it is so important. And I think your story just reminds us that we need to say that more often, where it's, the answer to that is good. It's such a good thing. I am so happy even to get excited when our child says that to us. You're bored? That's amazing. That means something good's going to come out of this, right? Like, sure. I think we get stuck in this filling the gap of boredom very quickly, right? You're bored, no problem. Here's an iPad or the phone, or watch some TV. And I think that we forget that there's so much brain development that happens when we're bored. I'll never forget a mom a couple of years ago that took a 1-week screen-free challenge. I had put that out there a while ago. And then I had interviewed her on my podcast. This is what the first Curious Neuron podcast episode. And
cool.
She said that her child, 2-year-old, had first rebelled on the first day, which I expected.
Sure.
But by the second day, the mom realized that the daughter had never learned how to pretend play on her own. And she realized that the daughter was just sitting there looking at some dolls and some, animal figurines, and started talking out loud and saying a couple words and sounds. And that's when it hit the mom that she had never given her that space to be curious about her toys and use those open-ended toys. When I talk to parents with young kids, I talk to them about being mindful, not shame, but being mindful of how many toys do the work for the child, right? Like buttons that we press and things that happen when we press that button, things that are said, and we just passively sit back and listen to it or watch it, versus that animal figurine or that doll or that little stuffy, that you have to make it walk and you have to make it talk and you have to imagine the world that it lives in, and maybe there's a tiger chasing it, right? Like, that's where brain development happens, and the boredom has to happen for your child to do that. Yeah. I think back to when I was growing up, my mom would bring me to my grandparents' house, and my grandmother would say, good morning. Here's the outdoors. Here's the backyard. I'll see you at lunchtime. And so I would, go and ring the neighbor's house, and there was a girl there my age, and we would just hang out in the backyard and look at flowers or grab a bucket and throw some dirt in it and rocks and say like, oh, would you like this magical potion? And then throw some water inside. My grandmother would knit and sew. And so she would make like these clothing items for my dolls. And I would take them all and then put them in a bucket with soap and water and wash them and then hang them on my grandmother's clothesline. The simple things that we've kind of taken away, not consciously, but there's this world that tells us that certain toys are developmentally appropriate and are going to boost our child's brain development, when in the end it's the basics. It's what we're using, right? Which is what our kids want to do. Think about when our kids are around all these toys and then they come to the kitchen and open a drawer and take a container or a bowl or a whisk, and you're like, no, not, you can't, these are not toys. They are. Right? They are toys. They are, because your child is trying to mimic what you are doing. And so they want to copy us, and that's where the learning is. And we need to give them that space to do that. And if every single minute, like you said before, is mapped out and planned out for them, then where is that space for them to be creative and imaginative and bored? Yeah.
Intentional boredom is something that I think we're going to begin to implement, because that was it just hit me at a good moment. I can't say that I would always react that way. I'm sure, because that's not the only time that they've said that.
Sure.
And I think a lot of times, specifically as a man, I want to fix it. The problem is you're bored. Well, here, let me fix that for you. Here, let's here's this screen, or here's whatever. But in that moment, it just kind of hit me as, okay, well, good. And I think maybe we need to create space for that intentionally. I'm with you 100%. And so imagination, curiosity, boredom, all of those are great tools for our kids. And that kind of plays into your approach towards parenting. So you've got 4 steps. That is the Curious Neuron approach to parenting. I'd love to kind of walk through those if we can. Number 1 being emotional awareness. So what does that mean as parents, that we become emotionally aware?
Well, so let's just use that example of boredom, right? Yeah. So the reason why we fill it up very quickly, we could think of a car ride and just giving the child the iPad during the car ride, is because it will become uncomfortable. It will become emotionally uncomfortable for all of us.
Absolutely.
Right? And so we don't want those negative I don't like saying negative, but we sometimes understand it more that way. But these uncomfortable, unpleasant emotions are uncomfortable for most of us. And so what I want parents to develop is that skill of awareness, which is part of emotional intelligence, but we've never learned these skills. We grew up pushing emotions to the side, masking emotions, pretending that we are okay. I tell my kids now, it's interesting, because if they are afraid of the dark, or they had a nightmare, and there's all of a sudden there's a monster or something in their closet, I will, address it with them. Let's see what there is. I validate their emotions. I understand that you're scared right now. I help them feel seen. I'm here for you. Versus when I think of my childhood, and I would tell my mom was a single mom, and I would say, like, please, I'm so scared of the dark. Don't close the door. Like, I think there's, something in my room. And she'd say, there's nothing in your room. Good night. And close the door. Right. And that was her way, and their way, the old way, I guess, of saying, like, just deal with it. But you're like a 7-year-old kid, and you're like, oh my gosh, that monster's going to come out of my closet.
It's very real. Right.
Right. It's real. It's real for you. And I think that we have to kind of tap into that and step back a little bit, right? Like, say, like, this is what I learned. These are the patterns that I have. But the emotional awareness piece comes in recognizing what the patterns are that we have when it comes to our emotions and our child's emotions. And we will never, or not never, but we will struggle very much, to support our child's emotions if we don't understand ours. And so if we, there are articles around suppressing emotions. We might think that saying I'm fine all the time, but not being fine, our kids know. They know, they sense it. They have this extra sense for emotions. And so the environment, right, becomes uncomfortable. A dinner where a parent is clearly upset, or parents have had an argument, kids know there's something off. And so we don't have to mask emotions. We don't have to suppress them. In fact, research has shown that when we suppress our emotions very often in front of our kids, they don't learn the tools and the skills to regulate their own emotions, right? Because they believe that just hiding them that way is the way to do it, because they haven't learned the tools. We haven't modeled that for them. And so that's why, for me, above everything else and anything else with what we do with Curious Neuron is emotional awareness, and helping you identify those moments when you might have an uncomfortable emotion and might unconsciously push it to the side.
Yeah, that's really important. They're watching us.
Always.
They're watching how we handle life, and then that will be their method, at least to start with, for how to handle their life. And so I want to dig in a little deeper there if we can, thinking about, okay, my kids, they're 3, 5, and 7. They have strong emotions. My oldest one's a girl.
Same.
I tell people she's 7 going on 17. She's got the strong emotions. Sometimes she's just, fine. Sometimes she's just melting down. The 5-year-old, he's the typical 5-year-old. He runs around. He's he's the middle kid. He's the classic middle kid. And then there's the youngest one, and he's 3, and he does not have any idea how to handle his emotions at all. What can we do as parents to kind of help them regulate those strong emotions? Because those emotions, they're just really saying what we're feeling a lot of times. They're expressing what we're feeling, but we have maybe the emotional intelligence at some times to be able to handle that better.
Right.
And hopefully not like pitch a fit in the middle of Target or something.
Right.
Yeah. But we feel that way too. We can just handle it better. So how do we come alongside them with those strong emotions,
right,
that are valid, but just maybe exaggerated?
Well, first, what you just said is important for us to highlight, where they have all the emotions, but maybe not that thinking part and that rational part to kind of regulate, right? And that's true. All of that is found in the frontal lobe, like behind your forehead. And so that part of the brain develops until our kids are 25. Unfortunately, it takes a long time.
Yeah.
It's a very important part of the brain. And so I'm saying that because we have to remind ourselves when we are triggered by the child in front of us who's having that tantrum in Target, to remind ourselves that they're not doing this to me, because we often feel that way. Like, why are you doing this to me right now? Not here, not now, not at a family member's house, not during holiday events, not now. And they're not doing that. They are very easily confused and feel emotions amplified in a way that they just can't control. And so that is the first step, just reminding ourselves that child is human and they are going through that as well. And I have posted once about tantrums where it's not terrible twos, it's teach me twos, right? And that's what the child needs right now. They have no idea what's going on. And I know that it feels ridiculous because sometimes they'll say, can I have the blue cup? And you give them the blue cup and they have a meltdown. And you're like, I don't understand what's going on. I don't get this. And it's just because, again, they're not sure of what's going on either. And they have a lot of big emotions. So that's the first step. What I like bringing into the conversation is something called the tripartite model of parental socialization. You don't have to remember that part, but there are 3 it's called tripartite for a reason. There are 3 important parts that I think all parents should know about, that have the greatest impact on their child's social emotional development. And the first one is how we model emotions. It's just the first step. And so when you remain calm as much as you can, it's not going to happen every single time. I'm a mom of 3 as well. Sometimes you lose it, and that's fine.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that after.
Yeah.
But in the moment, if you can remain calm, it's called co-regulation. And that child is looking towards you for that calmness. They can't find it in their brain. And so the calmer you remain, although it doesn't mean that it'll make all tantrums and big emotions disappear, it will help calm them sooner and faster. So that the way that you model it, and when you're in a car and a car passes in front of you and cuts you off, that's the best time to show how you regulate emotions, right?
Yep.
And so there are so many situations, and it's not just about getting angry. There are many more emotions, right? When you're disappointed, if you're cooking something and you thought you had that extra egg or the milk and there's nothing left and you're like, and you get really like frustrated, you can say out loud, I'm so disappointed. I can't make that, cake or a meal that I was so excited for. Man, I'm really disappointed. Well, okay, I guess there's nothing else I can do right now. I just maybe have to change the recipe. That is modeling. And we often go through that thinking in our minds, but we need to externalize that for our kids, because like you said, that child is sitting there in the living room looking at mom or dad and saying, oh, okay, that's disappointment. They might not be able to verbalize that yet, but they'll hear the word disappointment very often, right? I'll tell my kids, I'll use the word overwhelmed. We have 3 kids. We might use that word very often. I'll say, all these Legos, on the floor right now are making my brain feel overwhelmed. And can you guys just like put it all together in one container or push it to the side? Because I know that I'll get overwhelmed, and when my brain's overwhelmed, I'm gonna yell later. I'm just letting you know. And I say that, I verbalize that with my kids, and they know now. Don't let the Legos like have fun, but then at the end of the day, they better be put away because mom will lose it. It's okay, you know, to say that out loud. And again, that's what it looks like when you're modeling. The second part of that model is your parenting style. And so what I mean by parenting style is the kind of how you discipline and how you connect with your child. So balancing boundaries and limits with warmth and connection is the goal. And that's called authoritative parenting versus authoritarian parenting, which is what most of us were raised with, is I'm the parent, what I say goes, and your feelings and emotions and opinions don't matter in this home, right? Like, it's all about rules and boundaries. What I say goes. But then unfortunately with terms like positive parenting, the pendulum has kind of, you know, swung a little bit too hard towards the warmth and connection. And I think we need to be mindful of that as a society. When we say positive parenting, it's that authoritative parenting. And so we need to bring back the boundaries and limits. You know, kids need boundaries and limits. Without that, it becomes a very uncomfortable world when they're teenagers and young adults, because there will be limits and boundaries. And so why that has an implication or an impact on their emotional regulation skills is because you have to regulate that feeling of disappointment, right? You say to your child, or your child says to you, can I have a cookie for dessert or before bedtime? And you say no. Or can I have that extra cookie? It's really not the end of the world, maybe, right? It's like, well, okay. But if you haven't practiced boundaries and you're looking for little opportunities, that's a great opportunity to say no, right? And then your child will scream, yell, say, why not? Whine, make you feel guilty, whatever it is. That's when you practice emotions. And then that's when you help your child practice emotions. So like you said, you wanted to find opportunities for boredom and be mindful of that. We need to do the same for boundaries and limits and saying no. And then the third one, which is really hard sometimes, is how you model emotions with the other adult in your home, whether that's your partner, a family member, the two adults. Your child is looking towards that. If you're a single parent, then, you know, they're just looking at the interactions you have with adults around them that are closer. But in the home, that's what matters the most. And so if you are doing everything above, you know, that I just said, and you are parenting in the authoritative parenting way, setting the boundaries and connecting and showing warmth to your child, and you're modeling great emotions on your own, and then you're in front of your partner and you're shaming and you're name calling and you're yelling or you're suppressing and you're clearly upset, they are watching. And so we have to be mindful of how that impacts your child. So that's a big answer to your question.
And in a way that kind of erases, you know, the other things, right? Because, you know, they're like, well, okay, that's what really happens. And so that's how I'm going to handle things. So that's being emotionally aware. And then getting into the second thing, which is responding more than reacting, a greater emphasis on response instead of reaction. I love that because there's a big difference. Sometimes we use those words synonymously, but there's a big difference in those two.
Huge difference. You know, I think we are quick. And some parents will tell me, like, I'm quick to react, or I often go from 0 to 100, or I'm triggered and I don't know where it's coming from. And whenever they say I often go from 0 to 100, I say, no, the 1 to 99 was there. You just weren't aware of it. Right. That's my answer every single time. And it works.
You didn't just get there. You arrived there, and you know, the process may have been quickly and you may not have been aware of it, but yeah.
Exactly. And that's why emotional awareness is first, and then responding rather than reacting. Because if you don't have the emotional awareness, then you will react. You will not have the ability or the skills to kind of pause. And when your child says something, or your partner says something, or a colleague or a boss says something, and you're like, what the? Okay, you reacted. What you want to do is pause and say, why is this affecting me? Are they really like pointing me out, or the action that I've done? Is it, you know, we often go into this spiral of, I don't know, if a boss says, you know, you didn't do this work properly. I'm the worst. I'm not good at my job. Why am I here? I don't know, whatever negative thoughts that we have, versus saying, okay, what do I need to fix? Right. Tell me, and I'll get it done. And we do this with our child, right? Where I said before, like, my child is doing this to me. Right. Our child has big emotions, and we're like, why can't I just get this right? What's wrong with me? I'm not. I thought I'd be a good parent, or I thought this would be easy or fun, right? That it's okay to say that. and think that, and we do. So I think it's just important that in that moment we pause. And first, I always tell parents to check in with yourself, right? So it's very easy, again, 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, like in the evening, it's dinner time. Your child might have been at daycare most of the day and or school. And so they are dysregulated. And that's the word I teach parents for this, because if we can identify that they are dysregulated, meaning that their system is not totally focused, they might have been around a lot of sounds. You think about your 5 senses for dysregulation, right? Same thing for parents. If you're a stay-at-home parent and you have been around 3 yelling kids, true story, all day, by the time your youngest says mommy and it's 5 p.m. and you're trying to make dinner, you yell and you lose it. But it's because you're dysregulated. It's not that you were angry before they said it. It's not that you were sad. It's not an emotion necessarily. It's your nervous system. And so tapping into your nervous system is the first step to helping you respond rather than react. And then you can say, well, I like thinking about it in terms of like green zone, yellow zone, red zone. It's simple enough to have that visualization. Green zone being I'm totally regulated. I'm calm. I'm not thinking about anything in the future. So I'm not like stuck on my thoughts. I have enough sleep. I ate well, right? Everything is leading to you being regulated. And that means that you're more adaptable and flexible in terms of your brain. And then something happens, like your child spills milk, you'll say like, that's fine. You didn't mean to do it. I'll clean it up. Versus the yellow zone, maybe you didn't sleep well the night before. Maybe you're stressed about something at work. Maybe you had an argument with your partner, and it's stuck. It's stuck on your mind. And so your child spills that glass of milk. There's a 50% chance that you yell at them or you stay calm. And then red zone is that child saying, hey, mom or dad. And you're like, what do you want? Right. It was too late. You were in the red zone. You were not adaptable and flexible.
Right.
There was zero chance of you responding to that. So if we can be aware that we have this nervous system sort of regulation and dysregulation, and so do our kids. And so if you think about the end of the day, which is usually the hardest time for most parents, you are bringing in, let's say in my household, 5 dysregulated humans. And then you're saying, sit down, have dinner, and then go to bed when nobody wants to go to bed. And 2 adults want you to go to bed. Yeah. It's chaos. It's the recipe for chaos.
Right.
And so that's why usually bedtime is that kind of time of chaos. And so I tell parents, once you're mindful of moments that you are dysregulated and reacting more than responding, try to step back a little bit. What do I need first? Think about your child next. It's not selfish. You need to be okay first. What do I need? Do I need a moment to connect with my partner? Because I haven't spoken to them in a week, true story. And I have no idea how they've been doing, right? So taking the time to sit with your partner, you might tell your 3 kids, hey guys, go play. I need to sit, and have a conversation and have maybe a small glass of wine if it's a good day. I don't know, have a coffee, something, but have an adult conversation, setting that boundary and showing that you need connection. And if that allows you to say like, are you ready for game time? Let's go. And then you get ready for bedtime. Maybe that'll change bedtime. You haven't even done anything with your kids yet, but you feel more prepared because you're in that green zone. Yeah. Or it could be one particular child really struggles at bedtime and you say, I need to connect with them. And I'm using that word again, connection with your partner, connection with your child. Let's sit down and regulate together. What does my child need? Connection time. Let's color together. Let's do a puzzle before we take our baths today. Let's go for a walk if we have time. How do I regulate that child in front of me? And once we start doing that as a habit in a family, things get easier. And you haven't even implemented parenting advice, whatever that is, right? It's just about understanding the nervous system.
And that's so good, because that's I find myself in some of those zones at all periods of time.
Right. We fluctuate. It's not always, and even waking up, a brand new day is not green zone. If you had an argument with your partner the night before, it's still stuck on your mind. And also to be mindful of our past, not to dig into that. But if we experience childhood adversity or trauma, then there is a chance that our nervous system is always flirting with the yellow-red zone. And so we have to be mindful of that, because that means, and I'm one of those people where I wake up and I know I'm always borderline yellow-green zone because of my own background. I was raised in an extremely chaotic and unsafe environment. And so, which led to my parents divorcing. But for me, any small noise is a threat to my nervous system, and that's fight or flight. And so that's what our brain is figuring out, right? Like there aren't any bears in front of us, but it's perceiving tones of voice or a situation as fight or flight. And so I wake up and I have to, take a moment to center myself and say, okay, this is going to be a good day, whatever motivation I need in that moment. But that's what brings me back down just a little bit when I remind my body and my brain that I'm safe. We have to be aware of that.
Yeah, nervous system regulation is so, so important. And I love that you brought that up and that you really gone into that with us. And I like how you mentioned, okay, it starts with us. We've got to be able to regulate that ourselves and recognize and be self-aware of, okay, I'm yellow.
You're right.
I'm
exactly.
almost red, or I'm red. What do I need to do to back that up? What do I need to do? Because you know what? I'm not going to be the best version of myself
exactly
when I'm in those zones. And that's going to include being a good spouse, being a good father, mother, whatever the case may be. If we're at that point, we're just not going to be the best version of ourselves. And we owe it to our family to be able to pause and say, all right, how can I go into this better? And so I like that. But then there's also recognizing that in our children and recognizing that, okay, that connection, just like connection with us, pulls that meter down. So it does, the same thing with our kids. And so being able to connect and spend that time, bring their level down, can really make for a much calmer and peaceful experience in the evenings. And so, yeah,
exactly.
that makes so much sense. So then there's this concept of once we get past being emotionally aware, and then once we get past, okay, realizing that where our zones are, and that leads me to either respond or react, there's this feeling confident, which to me is really, really powerful, because there are not many times in my life where I feel confident as a parent. I mentioned that a minute ago. There aren't that many moments where I'm like, good job, Dad. Because, I think a lot of us don't really know where we are. We don't know how we're doing. We feel like there has to be a better way. And you're giving us a lot of value in showing us a better way. But where does confidence come in, and how can we feel confident as parents?
So you need to do that thing a little bit more, right? Well, because you know why? When we're at school, other people validate whether or not we knew that well, and we've learned or understood the knowledge. We get grades, and then we move on to work, and then our boss and our colleagues validate if we did that right. And then we become a parent, and there's absolutely nobody there to validate what we're doing. And so what do? We fall down this spiral of searching for information online, and then we come across Curious Neuron, hopefully, where there's the research. But just to say, right, I've spoken, so this summer, I was part of a startup incubator for Curious Neuron, and we had to interview 100 parents. I had to interview 100 parents. I'm at number 62 right now, but it's 62 hours of conversation about parenting, and it's been quite meaningful for me as a mom, and also as as the founder of Curious Neuron, to see what parents are going through. And besides parents saying, I want to know how to regulate my emotions, the next one was about confidence, and the third one is isolation. But the confidence piece comes up, and again, it's because nobody's there to validate. And so part of the reason why Curious Neuron is out there with the science is so that you can validate yourself and say, okay, I regulated my emotions, and that makes sense. I'm good. I can give myself that tap in the back. I want you to validate your own, parenting styles and skills and what you do. I don't want you to question, and I say you, not just you, Chad, but you, the parent. I truly, there's nobody else that's going to validate what we're doing as a parent. If anything, people will criticize. And it's very easy to get stuck in those moments. And whether it's our own parents or our in-laws or the internet that tells us that we're doing it wrong, it is so easy to get the criticism, but what we're looking for is validation. And so if we could just, at the minimum, educate ourselves a little bit, but learn to trust ourselves. I want parents to know that mistakes are good. We're not taught this as a child. We had to do the best that we could in school. Then in school, we have to get the best grades. And then at work, we have to be the best to move on and forward, right, in what we're doing. And so it doesn't work like that in parenting. We are going to mess up. We don't have to look to be the best parent out there. We just have to learn to tune in and connect with our child. And the more that we can understand who they are. I have 3 kids like you, and every single child is different. I parented them the same way, they've been raised in the same home with the same two parents. They're all very different.
Yes.
And so if I disconnect from them and I don't tune into what they're saying and what their needs are and what my needs are and how it's a relationship, right? I'm building a relationship with each one of these kids the same way that I've built a relationship with my husband. And so I built a stronger relationship through making mistakes, saying the wrong thing, understanding him, not understanding him, asking questions, getting curious, which comes back.
Yep.
And I need to do the same. I owe it to my kids to do the same. And so my goal as a parent, in order to build my own confidence, is just to know, like, I will mess up and that's okay. But as long as my kids know that I'm connected to them, with them, and I'm here for them, we will figure it out as we go.
Yeah.
That's all I want parents to know.
Kids are so forgiving.
Oh, I know.
and a lot of times,
like us.
we're harder on ourselves than
aren't we?
Than they are.
It's the compassion.
Yeah. And so leaning into that and realizing that this one decision, this one mistake is not going to ruin my child. There are lots of other good ones, and tomorrow's a new day. And I'm always seeking, I'm always learning, always trying to do my best, and that's what they want. They want connection, they want love. Hey, if we're providing that and nothing else,
right.
we're doing better than than I think that perhaps
we give ourselves credit.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So then there's leaning into feeling confident, but then leaning into becoming strong, resilient leaders. And I like that final piece. Can you dig into that a little bit with us too?
Yeah, I added that piece in the past 2 years. I always had the first 3. And then as I was growing Curious Neuron and started having people that were working with me on this project and building a team and trying to figure out how to grow this, I realized, somebody had asked me, are you an entrepreneur? And I was like, no, I'm just trying to build something. And they're like, no, you're an entrepreneur. And I was like, oh, okay, if you say so. But it's to me, I see all of these qualities, all these books that I'm reading about, how to be a strong leader and a resilient leader. I read them and I'm like, oh, this applies to being a parent as well, right? Like, how am I managing this team? What are the values that I'm instilling in this? You think about work culture. Well, the same applies within your home.
Yeah.
For me, Curious Neuron is based on the values of compassion and curiosity. And so I bring this into everything that I do in my life. So why not make sure that I'm doing this properly in my home and that my kids understand and see that these are the values? Then in terms of conflict resolution, whether, this is with somebody that's working with me, my partner, same thing applies with my kids. I need to apply conflict resolution skills with them.
Yes.
Effective communication. Am I taking on their perspective? We forget that. We kind of treat them as kids, thinking that, we don't have to take on their perspective, but you should see your child's eyes light up when you're like, I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't realized that by saying that to you, it will make you feel that way. I'm really sorry. What? Like, they look at you like, are you sure? Are you okay? But we would do that with colleagues. We would do that at work, right? And then we come home and we treat our kids very differently. And so I think that we need to be mindful of that. We are the CEO or co-CEOs of our home. And so we are managing this team. And what kind of leader do we want to be? That culture in your home, whether it's micromanaged at work, stressful, let's say that's what it is. You can create that in your own home. You can tell a kid, your child, no, don't brush your teeth this way, do it that way, tie your shoe this way. No, when you clean up, don't put it on this shelf, put it on that shelf. You're micromanaging.
Yeah.
And then you go to work and you say, I hate leaders that are micromanagers. Well, right?
Yeah.
So you are the leader. And so I think every parent should have some sort of very small training in terms of, as a leader, who do you want to be? How do you want to inspire? How do you want to motivate your team? As a leader, you should know it's not about all 3 kids being great at everything. It's about you, the leader, knowing what are they good at? What can I help them double down on because they're so great at that skill? And what are their challenges? And as a leader, I should know that I need to support my team so that those challenges, I'm giving them the skills to work on those challenges, not put them down for it and say, wow, you really suck at managing your emotions. Like, you're the worst, right? Or why aren't you good at math? Come on, you know better than this.
Yeah.
Versus, hey, maybe we need to work on a few problems this weekend and get better at that. That's what a leader is, not putting them down. So always think about the way that you're treating your child. If you were a boss, or if your boss is treating you that way, would that feel supportive? Would that feel connected? Would that feel motivating? And if not, we need to rethink about how we're leading our children.
That's so good. And all of these are just, they're small shifts in our perspective and in the way that we think about parenting, but it's shifts that can really make a difference. And
Huge.
this has been so insightful. Cindy, where can my listeners find you? You've got a lot going on at Curious Neuron.
Yes.
You've got some really neat things in the works that are going to be releasing
Mhm.
maybe this month, if I saw that right.
Yes.
So yeah,
Next
can you tell
week,
us about how to
September.
connect with you?
Yes. So curiousneuron.com is the best place to start. If somebody is interested in reading articles, we summarize the science right there. So if you're a reader, that's the place to begin. There's a Curious Neuron podcast as well, where I interview researchers and experts and sometimes share my own stories, because I do think that sometimes people think just because you have a degree in neuroscience that you never make mistakes. And so I
Right.
share my mistakes.
Good.
And then there's social media, if that's what you're interested in. But most importantly, we're launching the Reflective Parent Club. And I just felt that there were so many, memberships that were about like what to say to your child when they have a tantrum, or, how to support them in their I don't know, when they're a baby, what's the right way to do this and that. I didn't want that. I really wanted a space for parents. And so to me, becoming that mindful, calm parent that you want to be starts, one reflection at a time. And so the Reflective Parent is about stepping back and pausing and learning how to say, not even just with your child. We cover the parent-child relationship, we cover your personal growth, and then your relationship with your partner. Because if you had an argument with your partner, we'll probably yell at our child at some point later in the day because we're still annoyed or frustrated about something. And so when you learn how to reflect, and we have all these audios and these videos that people can follow, and we meet every single Tuesday, when you learn how to reflect, you can step back after that and say, I didn't take on my partner's perspective and I need to come back and repair that. We give you the tools to do that. And I think that if we can learn how to do that as a society, that what the Surgeon General said about stress and what you opened up this conversation with, I think stress would be a lot lower because we are taking care of things ourselves and handling our emotions a lot better.
Yeah, 100%. And I just want to add, your website is so valuable. There are so many articles, and you've got the podcast link on there, and there's actually there's a starter kit on there too. It's a free tool.
Yes,
I got mine today, and so
thank you.
So you guys check her out. Curious Neuron, doing great work in the field of parenting, and you're really helping people feel less isolated and providing them the tools and resources they need to really kind of step up and step into their role as parents. So, Cindy, what a pleasure this has been. Thanks again for joining us on the show. And you guys check her out. You're going to love the work she's doing. So, Cindy, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the RevRx podcast. We hope you enjoyed what you heard today. And if so, we'd love it if you would hit that subscribe button so that you'll never miss a new episode from us. Also, feel free to leave us reviews and comments, as we'd love to hear from you. Be blessed and be the very best you.